Welcome to ARM Presents Fireside Chats, panel discussions looking at the business potential of technology. The automotive industry has been in a period of intense electronic innovation with advances in powertrain, in-car experience, and greater levels of self-driving activity. In this Fireside Chat, we will examine the potential effects of the recent economic downturn on this innovation. Today's moderator is Chet Babla from ARM.
Hi there, my name's Chet Babla. I'm the Vice President of the Automotive Business here at ARM. Joining me today for this Fireside Chat, I have three colleagues. Gentlemen, would you like to introduce yourselves?
Hello, my name is Soshun Arai. I'm based in San Jose. I'm Director of Automotive Solutions.
I'm Andrew Hopkins. I'm Director of System Technology within ARM's Automotive and IoT business in Cambridge.
Hi everyone, I'm Tom Conway. I lead the automotive product team here at ARM.
Great, thank you gentlemen. So we've got a really interesting topic to talk about today. Where will automotive manufacturers innovate in a downturn? When I look around, obviously what's happening given the downturn due to COVID, it does feel all a bit doom and gloom. And you know, when you look at the analyst forecasts around the number of light vehicles that are going to be sold, they're projecting anywhere from 20% down year on year, maybe even lower. So we could be looking at 70 million cars being produced and sold this year. So when we look at the industry, when you guys engage with the ecosystem, are you seeing the OEMs are stepping up to the mark? Do you see innovation is happening today? Do you want to start, Andrew?
For sure. I mean, OEMs are absolutely innovating. I mean, a good area as an example is powertrain, right? So, I mean, there's a lot of innovation going on right now around electrification. And there's several drivers there besides OEMs being good kind of corporate citizens. And one of the big drivers is the regulatory environment. And it's really creating a positive momentum towards innovation. I mean, take the European Union, for example. Their regulations are really driving CO2 emissions down progressively with a view that by 2030, they need to be 37.5% lower than for 2021. That's an enormous, colossal drop. And it's a tough challenge, but OEMs are really rising to it. And one of the hopes I think they had was that the regulations might get relaxed a little bit in the short term due to the COVID-19 crisis. But ultimately, that's not really happened, and OEMs are really up against the wall to try and pull out these continued innovations, and they are absolutely rising to it. I mean, the end goal is, I think, it really is going to be full electric, battery-powered vehicles, but to get there is still going to take time, and actually the emissions regulations are sufficiently challenging just for the short term that we're going to have to see a multitude of innovations to actually get there. And that's going to involve having a mixture of different types of hybrid vehicle as well as the investments in full EV. And so we can certainly expect to see some OEMs offering only some form of hybrid and battery EV at some point. Many of those vehicles will be mild hybrid, and that's a kind of lower cost solution, but still makes a big difference in terms of efficiency. Clearly full hybrid and plug-in hybrid we see a few of those around now, and they obviously are pretty important. We're also seeing hybrids increasingly for both diesel and petrol in Europe. So that's again another area where there is increasing choice for consumers, but also big innovation from the OEMs. And as I said before, you know, the end goal is battery operated. I mean, take the UK. The UK is planning to ban carbon fuel vehicles from 2030, and that really sets the end goal. But to get there, they're going to have to have a combination of technologies, and I see those being predominantly electrification of some kind. I mean, there's clearly other technologies like hydrogen, And I think they have a role to play, particularly in fleets and commercial vehicles and buses, etc., where the operators have the infrastructure to fuel those vehicles. But really, I think in the long term, one of the reasons battery EV wins out is that it's actually a very simple platform compared to a combustion engine, let alone these really quite complex hybrid technologies that are involving a mixture of kind of worlds that have to be somehow joined together. So it's definitely headed in that electrification direction. I mean,
and we're going to see a lot from governments in that space.
Yeah, I mean, and it's I was just saying it's a really good point that we'll need a combination of electrification technologies. Battery is the ultimate goal, but having this combination of mild and full and plug-in is going to be the way that OEMs are going to be able to reach some of these really tough short-term emissions targets. Tom, did you have a comment there?
Well, I mean, I think we're seeing that across various regulatory bodies and governments, where we're seeing the consumer subsidies being continued, encouraged generally to drive the uptake of greener vehicles. Across both Germany and China, you've seen extending their subsidy programs going forwards. But I think I agree with Andrew's point. It's not all about batteries. It'll really be that mix of a sort of mild and everything to full hybrid is needed to make those sort of huge short-term impacts on CO2 and still give consumers the performance and the range that they need for their journeys. It will take a long time before consumers move purely to battery electric vehicles.
Yeah, and I mean the consumer really is important in all of this, right? You know, when we look at the global trend towards better awareness about climate change, you know, we as consumers want to make those better green choices in the products that we buy, and that includes the cars that we buy as well. Soshun, how about the US? Obviously gas has been king for a long time. Are you seeing an electrification trend in the US?
Of course, before and during this lockdown, there are many announcements by the OEMs on electrification especially. So Ford committed $11 billion and 40 new electrified platforms, including 16 EVs by 2020, and GM investing $20 billion into electrified powertrain by 2025. And another positive announcement by Toyota, that's RAV4, that is a best-selling SUV in the US. It has a plug-in hybrid version in this summer, with 42 miles for EV range. However, this is true. Even before this pandemic happened, gas prices has been declining in the US because US is now oil exporter country. And this could delay the transition to EV in the US, but very importantly, California still keep zero emission vehicle program, so-called ZEV, and now other 12 states follow it, and including New York and Pennsylvania. So New York, Pennsylvania is a very large population, by the way. If OEM want to sell the car in the California, the largest car market in the US and New York, they have to sell EV or plug-in hybrid anyway. So this is a trend in the US.
And picking up on that consumer choice part, I think certainly in parts of Europe, certainly some of Scandinavia, we're seeing consumers very much voting with their feet. I mean, personally, I made the jump to an EV 2 years ago now. My family and I, we looked at the sort of our usage and for how much our sort of day-to-day use. For our day-to-day use, these current technologies easily cover our daily requirements with a charge overnight on the drive. I mean, for us, a sort of a 200-mile day out is a huge endeavour that we wouldn't undertake lightly without a significant amount of planning. From where we live, you can get to the coast and back comfortably within 200 miles of range. But we also looked at the recent years of the holidays we've had here in the UK, and we concluded that with our two small children, the idea of stopping after 2 hours of driving was pretty much on our list already. You have to plan breaks and let them run around a bit. So stopping to charge a car, that seems to work for me. I'm a bit of a planner by nature. So looking at driving times, range, charging options, having a plan, that all works for me. I do have to admit we have ended up hanging a long extension cable out of a holiday cottage to make sure we got home. So it's not simple, but it's certainly doable on current technologies.
Yeah, that made me chuckle. And I guess the other point, of course, is that governments are also looking at the infrastructure side of electrification and making sure that they're starting to, ensure this kind of range anxiety that people who perhaps don't plan as well as you might, Tom, can still have this option to consider electric vehicles for these longer drives. So, I mean, I'm hearing you guys, hearing about some of the regulatory effects that's boosting a move towards more electrification of platforms. Hearing about the US, where yes, gas is cheap, but actually there is a growing consumer demand, and let's not forget that Tesla's biggest market after all is the US. It does sound as though that powertrain is an interesting area of innovation for OEMs. I wanted to talk a little bit about software-defined vehicles. We hear this a lot. Well, in general, we hear about software-defined everything, but in particular, we've heard how vehicles are becoming defined by software. What's driving this trend, and is this an opportunity for more innovation for OEMs? Tom, would you like to start?
Yeah, I think we're certainly seeing numerous discussions that we have with people in the industry, but also key public announcements, things like VW's car.software lead talking about the need to take control of both the hardware and the software architecture and investing a huge sort of 7 billion euros purely into their software strategy. For me, I think this is vehicle manufacturers seeing the types of things that have happened in perhaps the mobile industry, looking at where those not just the control points, where the ownership, where the user experience comes from the work you do in software. Because, of course, what those consumers see in their vehicle is nearly all software driven these days. But from those OEMs, we're also seeing a lot of talk about how they consolidate the numbers of ECUs, these little black boxes, into their vehicle architectures. As more and more companies look at the changes coming and the opportunity for change with things like electrification and building new platforms from the ground up and sharing platforms across different car manufacturers, they're looking at all of the electronics as a complete system and looking at how they can optimize and make changes in the design they do today to allow them to have some of that flexibility in the future, to allow them to upgrade, make changes going forwards. So I think we've seen some recent examples of people talking about perhaps over-provisioning the compute capabilities of their current generation, of their current products, such that over time they can add more and more functions, features and capabilities during the life cycle of that vehicle. So that's why we see OEMs investing heavily.
Oh, that's interesting. That's almost like looking to future-proof the car, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, but don't forget the software-defined functionality needs over-the-air, so OTA updates. So adding or enabling new features by OTA has been a topic for years. So I remember some people still had doubt when Tesla started OTA services, but now it's a clear trend, and the OEM are very serious to gain additional revenue stream through the OTA services. So there are many challenges though. For example, OEM need to put more security and then predict more future hardware performance. So if the predicted hardware performance is not good enough, then the vehicle with hardware might not be able to support a new feature by the OTA in future. So it will be a disaster for OEM because they cannot get a new revenue. So OEM have to have a proper hardware or compute platform that have some performance margin. And plus, the vehicle need to be generating so much data and deciding what is relevant and what is consumed in the vehicle or edge, or what is uploaded to cloud will be also a bit challenging. In my view, the software complexity forced to form new alliance or partnership across the industry. For example, NVIDIA Mercedes partnership. So Mercedes CEO clearly mentioned about the services, creating their own Mercedes-Benz operating system to add new features. especially related to the autonomous drive or driving assistance area during the lifetime of the vehicle by the OTA for our recurring revenue stream.
Yeah, that was a big announcement. I saw that, and I think it's probably a good bet to think that's not going to be the last of these kinds of partnerships that we're going to start to see between OEMs and technology companies. Andrew, I mean, we're speaking obviously about OEMs here. Have tier ones got a role to play? How do we think they're going to fit into this software-defined vehicle world?
Well, there's certainly a lot of change here, and it is fair to say that the big OEMs are taking more control. But actually, the tier ones are still important, and actually, I'm really excited about some of the innovations that they're driving. I mean, to date, they've played a really critical role in software integration, and we're moving to a world of the software-defined vehicle where software integration is key. I mean, I think in any event, they're going to be needed to manufacture and assemble the electronic chassis to the specification of the bigger OEMs, as well as supply software-defined modules. But going forwards, they will still remain really critical for the smaller OEMs because they need the scalability and software-defined aspects of the car. But actually, they haven't got the volume or some cases the capability to define their own computer chassis. And that's where the large tier ones can really step in. They can provide that computer chassis. They can provide a large amount of the software pre-integrated and as a proven integration solution. It will also be possible to integrate third-party applications. And across all of these vehicle developments, I think we're going to see an emergence of a software module market. So it will be a bit like Android, but aimed more at the vehicle OEMs than the consumers. But I think for that to work, there's going to need to be some alignment, particularly in the area of standards-based APIs in order to make these software modules plugged together in a low-cost, easy-to-integrate kind of way. But actually, if the industry can crack this, where I think tier ones are a big part of actually driving that definition, driving those standards, then the integration pain that's really hurting OEMs and to an extent tier ones today, it's actually going to fade away. And I think that is really pivotal to this shift towards software-defined car.
And Andrew, presumably the fundamental role of tier ones remains for all those valid reasons, the spreading of cost across the supply chain. So the fundamentals are still very much baked into the tier ones supplying OEMs in many, many examples across the car.
That's absolutely right, Tom. And I think in certain areas they're of course also the leading providers. So if you take some of the chassis systems, for example, then those come from tier ones. The OEMs tend not to develop those things themselves anyway. They don't have the expertise. And when it comes to that spreading of kind of technology investment across vehicles, then that's really where they come in with the smaller OEMs, because as OEMs consolidate and some of the bigger ones get even bigger, they can start to afford to do these things themselves to differentiate and save their own costs. And they don't necessarily need the tier one to the full extent that the smaller OEMs do. So it's going to be vital, I think, for the survival of the smaller OEMs.
It's interesting hearing some of the things you guys have just mentioned about how consolidation is driving the need for more software capability, how the connected car is bringing this opportunity of OTA or over-the-air updates to allow configurability. Today cars are sold, the car drives off the dealership forecourt, and basically that's it, done. Your interaction with the consumer is pretty much done, apart from when you need to do some servicing. So the fact that OEMs are now seeing the software-defined connected vehicle as an opportunity to perhaps have an ongoing relationship and service-driven relationship with consumers is really interesting, and I can see how that's driving this innovation under the hood, so to speak. What about actually innovating in the vehicle cabin, and in-vehicle experience? Is that something we're seeing OEMs are looking at and investing in? Soshun, perhaps if you'd like to start.
Sure, OEM have to spend. I think they are very spending more effort to the car experience. So in-car experience continue to be a consumer priority. So in my personal case, so my car has rear seat entertainment and multiple displays, but cannot change the contents for each displays. So everybody have to watch same video in my car. We have 3 kids, and they want to watch different video or content individually, and then we spent hours in our vehicle, and we want to experience to be the positive and enjoyable and informative.
And not have a family fallout.
And we live in US. So as a driver, I want to have a better head-up display for easy driving and a more clear vision at the side view mirrors to reduce my stress, especially when changing the lane, because there are many cars on American roads with multiple lanes.
Yeah, I mean, some of Soshun's examples are really going to highlight how there's this increased demand for multiple, in fact, different user experiences in the vehicle. What we're seeing through any of the discussions ARM has is really an increase in the desire for higher graphics capability, and that becoming a more and more critical component to give people that mobile phone or tablet-like experience in their vehicle, both for the driver and for the passengers. I mean, we're even seeing a rising need for higher levels of functional safety in the cockpit.
Sorry, functional safety in the cockpit. What's the use case for that, Tom?
Yeah, I mean, it's all about bringing information to the driver about the ultimately leading to the safety of that vehicle. So there's a wide range of examples where you'll start to see the driver monitoring system start to be included in the safety case for the vehicle. I mean, Soshun mentioned his electronic mirrors. Of course, you'll need to make sure if those are your only way of seeing what's happening out to the side, you need to ensure you can rely on the information being fed to you. You're making decisions based on those electronic components. So ultimately, at various levels, they start to play into the safety case of the vehicle. I mean, everything from simple warning lights telling you about engine or battery management, and Soshun mentioned his heads-up display. The more and more people come to rely on the information that's fed to them, the more and more those features become, or the operation of those features becomes critical to the safety of the vehicle and the occupants.
Yeah, those use cases were really good to explain the need for functional safety there, because I was kind of thinking from an entertainment point of view, if the screen malfunctions or my daughter can't hear her favorite song playing, yes, it might be a calamity for her, but it's not really a functional safety issue. But I guess given the examples you've given, makes it clearer. Andrew, anything from you on this in-vehicle experience side?
Well, let's build on the idea of your daughter listening to a song, right? Because the innovation's not just about vision, it's not just about safety. There's actually innovation going on around audio. And by that, I'm not really talking about continuous improvement of playback quality. I mean, that's pretty good already. What I'm actually talking about is OEMs using multi-speaker systems to provide near-field audio to specific occupants. I mean, this is going to be new and kind of changing for the overall cabin experience, as well as providing drivers with enhanced information such as those spatial audio rendering to guide them when they're maneuvering or like when they're parking, but as well as actually in emergency situations to actually guide the driver in kind of where they need to go to navigate a safe course. There is definitely significant innovation. I mean, there's also the obvious application of road noise cancellation. That's something that is already starting to emerge. And although that takes us back to audio quality, it is something that can make the cabin experience more relaxing, particularly on those longer drives. And actually, just thinking back to where we were with consolidated environments and the software-defined car, I mean, Tom introduced the idea that OEMs are looking to gain portability, I think, within that discussion. And Actually, one of the things that you can do is make sure that the audio stack is portable. You know, we have all this complex software and filter workloads, and what OEMs want to be able to do is deploy that on whatever hardware platform they're presented with, and not really have to worry about the details of specific audio accelerators or DSP subsystems. And where we're seeing, I think, a trend now is towards actually trying to run these audio workloads on the applications processors alongside all of the other pieces of software. And actually by doing that, you get to an environment that is much more friendly towards portability, and overall that makes the total cost of the platform and development across a whole set of model ranges lower. And that really fits with this idea of ECU consolidation.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I guess we've spoken about how OEMs are innovating within the vehicle, and I guess along the way we've solved Soshun's family problem of multi-screen content consumption. But what about the world of driver and road user safety? I mean, surely this has got to be a major area for technology development. Soshun, what are you seeing here when you talk to the ecosystem?
Yeah, automation is increasingly becoming a key requirement for new cars, such as adaptive cruise control, automatic emergency braking system, and the lane change warning or lane keep assistance. Ford decided to install automatic braking system and the camera-based lane keep assist as a standard features to the most of the new vehicle, including best-selling vehicle F-150 from 2020. So advanced safety feature are rapidly becoming a standard in the US, and I would say automatic or semi-automatic parking system, which requires another cameras and additional computing resources, is becoming a popular feature as well in the US.
Okay. Tom, from your perspective, where are we seeing innovation opportunity in this world of kind of driver and road user safety?
Yeah, absolutely. I think consumers are becoming more and more aware of the safety properties when they purchase their vehicle, when they drive their vehicle. And so here you'll see these the work that the NCAP, Euro NCAP and others are doing. They're starting to include the electronic systems more and more in the ratings for the vehicles. So ultimately, for those consumers who are looking for the highest levels of safety, the NCAP standards are driving them to ask the question of, which of these automatic features do you have? Can you show me and demonstrate to me that those have been tested as part of your safety ratings? So I think consumer choice and the inclusion of the electronic systems in both the NCAP systems and of course in the US, they're strongly advocating movement to more and more safety systems to promote those capabilities in their vehicles.
Yeah. And I wonder, as we start to move to higher levels of automation in vehicles, does that mean there's a role for machine learning in this area? Andrew, thoughts?
Certainly, yeah. Machine learning is an integral part of all perception systems these days, and everything ADAS and various forms of autonomy, they all now rely on some element of machine learning, if not or in total reliance on machine learning for the perception kind of part of that system. Another key area is the driver monitoring system, and that's something that is essentially needed for the ADAS system to guarantee that the driver is paying attention and is available. That could be directly within the ADAS platform. It could actually be a standalone module, but also it could be delegated to the cockpit system. And that really links back to what Tom was saying about there being an emergence of safety in the cabin. So a lot of these systems are becoming more interconnected and more integrated. And ML is just one example.
I mean, those functional safety systems, Andrew, they really, they're ultimately defined by the car OEMs and the car makers, but those car manufacturers are looking down their supply chain to see higher and higher levels of safety capability, documentation, all the way up to the highest level ASIL D. They're looking down the supply chain to see how their suppliers can conform to the various functional safety standards and ultimately deliver a faster path to that safety requirement.
Okay, but we should ignore the role of startups here. So startups are developing the algorithm and the sensor technology. The OEM Tier 1 has a research group for sure, but the startups have a fresher mind in general to try something new. And most of startups for algorithm has many computer science PhDs. So they may have strong expertise on the function safety, but as they develop new algorithm or optimize the algorithm better or quicker, especially for perception and the data fusion process, I think OEMs and Tier 1 are still looking for the partnership with the startups.
Yeah, that's a really important point as well, Soshun. This area is so challenging, and it will take partnerships across a variety of companies in the value chain, all the way from the OEM, the Tier 1, the silicon vendor, and also some of these small, medium enterprises and even startups helping to solve some of these safety-related challenges. I guess we're probably running out of time here, so a final question to you all. Are you positive about the outlook for automotive OEMs in the industry kind of post-COVID? Perhaps a couple of points you might want to pick on each, starting with you, Andrew?
I'm actually really positive. I'm really excited actually about the innovation I'm seeing. I mean, right now, I think it's one of the toughest times to ever be an OEM, but actually that they will rise from this, and we really will see the fruits of the innovation that they're working on now.
Thank you. Tom?
Yeah, very much. I think it's a challenging time right now, but the discussions we're having with partners confirms they're already looking ahead to model year 2021, model year 2023, and onwards into 2025. And the areas they're really looking to do more in is around this in-vehicle experience, bringing that sort of mobile or tablet experience to the consumers, but also safety. As consumers become more and more aware of the safety requirements, aware of what can be done and what state-of-the-art safety is, the OEMs will absolutely rise to deliver what those consumers want.
Thank you. And Soshun, 2 thoughts from you?
Sure. So recession is inevitable and unpredictable, but in general, I'm very positive about the auto industry post this pandemic, even if 2020 will be a very tough year. So I'm expecting a V-shaped recovery in 2021, and I know many Tier 1 and OEM are very busy developing a new generation ADAS for 2022 or 2025 model years. And many startups are very active to promote their new algorithm by online meeting today.
Gentlemen, I want to thank you for your thoughts and insight today. We are in an unprecedented environment at the moment, but it sounds as though from some of the points that you've raised and we've discussed today, there is a future for innovation. The opportunity does look positive for the automotive industry. So thank you again, and great talking to you.